Darius Wynn was used to attention, but tonight, the silence felt different. He sat in seat 1A on Aurelia's Skyflight as 777, first class. The lights were dimmed to a warm amber. The leather seats, imported from Italy. The crystal glass by his elbow shimmered with still water, untouched. And the tray in front of him? A cold, plastic-wrapped chicken sandwich, wilted lettuce, a packet of crackers, and a paper napkin that didn't belong in this cabin. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. Across the aisle, a white man in a navy blazer was laughing with a stewardess. She poured him a glass of Dom Perignon. Wagyu beef, cooked rare, arrived moments later, plated with gold-rimmed cutlery. Next to him, another passenger sipped his sake, watching a movie on a 15-inch screen built into the seat. Every detail was polished. Perfect. First class, by the book. But Darius had pre-ordered his meal 7 days in advance, through Aurelia's VIP concierge app. He had the confirmation email, the time-stamped receipt, the executive status level printed right on his boarding pass. Diamond Elite, 12 consecutive years. Still, when the stewardess came, she didn't ask if he was Mr. Wynn. She said, "Hey buddy, we ran out of premium meals. This one should be fine." She didn't flinch when handing him the tray. She didn't blink. She didn't care. And in that moment, beneath the artificial calm of the cabin, Darius Wynn saw the system. Again. Not loud. Not overt. But calculated. The way the flight crew addressed others as Mr. Thompson or Dr. Allen. But him. Just buddy. The way champagne bottles popped behind him, but he was offered water. It wasn't about the meal. It wasn't even about the tone. It was about the quiet denial of place. Darius sat back, eyes still on the tray. He didn't frown. He didn't speak. He simply tapped once on his smartwatch, activating a silent trigger. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a message. And Darius Wynn? He was about to send one back. Darius Wynn wasn't just another businessman in a first-class seat. He was the man who redefined cybersecurity in the United States. At 38, he had already built a billion-dollar tech empire from the ground up. Wynn Cyber Incorporated, headquartered in downtown Atlanta. A company born from frustration, failure, and fire. The kind of fire that burns in you when every door you knock on gets slammed shut, not because you're unqualified, but because you don't look like the people already inside. Raised by a single mother in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Brooklyn, Darius learned early that silence was never safety. It was just the sound right before someone told you no. His first laptop was a hand-me-down from a neighbor, missing half the keys. But with it, he taught himself to code, to crack systems, and to build them stronger than before. By age 22, he had already created a predictive firewall model that major banks would later license. By 28, he walked into his first IPO meeting, and every white executive in the room assumed he was there to set up the projector. They didn't ask for his pitch. They asked for coffee. He gave them both, and walked out with a contract worth $18 million. Now, a decade later, he was heading to Tokyo. Invited as a keynote speaker for the Global Cyber Defense Summit, where leaders from NATO, tech giants, and national security agencies would gather to hear his ideas on AI-driven threat detection. This wasn't just another conference. This was where the future of online warfare was being shaped. And they wanted Darius Wynn to shape it. That's why every detail of his trip was planned with precision. His team had handled the booking. His executive assistant, Zach, had double-checked everything. The seat, the lounge access, the pre-ordered meal, the luggage security clearance. For someone who protected governments against data breaches and cyber attacks, the idea of being unconfirmed was absurd. And yet, here he was, in seat 1A, staring down a tray that symbolized everything he'd fought against for years, not just inefficiency, but intentional disregard. Not a glitch. A message. A message that said, "You don't belong." But Darius Wynn had never needed permission to belong. He built his own table. And now, as the plane cut through the Pacific night sky, he wasn't just traveling to Tokyo. He was carrying a reckoning. And somebody, some system, was about to feel it. Darius Wynn didn't leave things to chance. Not in business. Not in life. And certainly not when flying 6,000 miles across the Pacific on a flight that would put him face-to-face with world leaders and military analysts. The ticket was booked 4 weeks in advance, first class, Aurelia Sky, flight as 777, LAX to Haneda. Departure, 11:10 p.m., sharp. His preferred aisle seat, 1A, had been secured by Zach, his right-hand man and executive assistant. A genius with logistics. Every detail had been confirmed, documented, and stored in Wincyber's encrypted travel portal. Darius didn't just rely on the airline system. He had his own. The meal selection was submitted 7 days before takeoff. Through Aurelia Sky's Diamond Elite Concierge portal, he selected the Kaiseki Experience, a curated Japanese multi-course menu designed for their top-tier passengers. It included a 5-grade Kobe beef, fresh toro sashimi flown in from Osaka, a warm bowl of miso with clams, and a ceremonial matcha dessert. The confirmation email came within 45 seconds. It included the reservation code, flight number, timestamp, and a notation, "Special meal confirmed, VIP status override." 3 days later, a reminder arrived via text. "Mr. Wynn, your gourmet menu has been confirmed for flight as 777. Our team looks forward to welcoming you on board." This wasn't just about food. This was about protocol, precision, proof that systems were working as intended. And for a man who spent his life designing frameworks to prevent data leaks, disinformation campaigns, and state-sponsored cyberattacks, a missed confirmation wasn't something he could accept. Not from any system. On the day of the flight, Darius arrived at LAX 2 hours early, bypassed the standard check-in, and was escorted through the priority skypath. Biometric scan, facial recognition, 0 waiting. In the private lounge, a hostess greeted him by name, offered him a hot towel and a glass of green tea. His luggage had been pre-cleared. His itinerary, digitized and synced to his smartwatch. Boarding time, 10:35 p.m. Everything was clean, flawless. Until it wasn't. Because when that tray landed on his table mid-flight, plastic-wrapped sandwich, no sashimi, no Kobe, not even rice, he knew something had failed. But it wasn't the system. It was the people behind it. Someone made a decision. A subtle, dismissive one. And for Darius Wynn, that decision had just triggered something they couldn't walk back. Not this time. He didn't expect a red carpet. Darius Wynn wasn't that kind of man. But what he didn't expect, what still caught him off guard, was how invisibility could wear a smile. It started the moment he stepped into the cabin. The lighting was dim, designed to soothe. The air smelled faintly of citrus and leather. Darius moved toward seat 1A, his carry-on perfectly sized to slide into the overhead bin. He wore a navy 3-piece suit, custom-tailored for Milan. His shoes. Midnight black with a high-shine polish that matched the brushed steel of his Omega watch. As he settled in, a flight attendant, tall, blonde, neatly groomed, approached the aisle. She greeted the man in 1B first. "Mr. Redmond, welcome aboard again. We've prepared your usual wine selection." Then she turned to Darius. No smile. No eye contact. Just a glance. "Hey buddy, seat 1A? You're all set." Buddy. A 3-letter word that punched like a slap in a silk glove. She didn't ask for his name. Didn't check his ticket. Didn't match his face to the Platinum Elite profile stored on her tablet. She just assumed. Darius raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He didn't need to. Years of boardrooms, briefings, and billion-dollar decisions had taught him one thing. When people see you as less, they tell you without knowing they've said a word. He watched as she walked 2 rows down. "Dr. Ellison, champagne as usual?" The older white gentleman nodded, and she poured with a gracious tilt of the bottle. Darius looked down at his armrest. No drink offered. No towel. No acknowledgement. Another attendant passed by moments later. "Good evening, Mr. Kepler. So glad to have you with us again." The words slid like silk. Familiar, yeah. But they weren't for Darius. No one said, "Mr. Wynn." No one said anything. He was there, but not really. And that was the first sign. Not of racism with teeth and fists, but of something older, colder, and more dangerous. Assumption. Assumption that a man who looked like him couldn't be a tech CEO. Assumption that Buddy was enough. He sat back, his fingers laced together, resting on his lap. Calm. But inside, the gears had begun to turn. Because for Darius Wynn, this wasn't about disrespect. It was about recognition. And now, the absence of it had just triggered something far bigger. The word, buddy, echoed longer than it should have. Darius leaned back, closed his eyes, and for a moment, the cabin faded. The smell of leather was replaced by the faint trace of printer ink and cheap coffee. He was back in San Francisco, 10 years ago. A tech investment summit hosted inside a glass-walled conference center that overlooked the bay. The kind of place where disruption was thrown around like a party trick, and every name badge carried a hidden resume. He was 28 then, dressed in a slim gray blazer, jeans, and his favorite pair of sneakers. Not because he wanted to look casual, but because that was the startup uniform. Or so he thought. He stepped into the meeting room of a well-known venture capital firm. 7 white men sat around a long table, all in pressed suits, sipping espresso. His pitch deck was loaded, his product was polished, and his analytics had blown through the ceiling. His startup had already secured $3 million in contracts with 2 regional banks. But when he walked in, one of the partners didn't even look up. He turned to the assistant and said, "Could you bring us another round of coffee?" Darius didn't flinch. He smiled. "I'll bring it, right after I show you how my software just prevented a 6-figure fraud attack in real time." The room went silent. But the damage had already been done. Later that day, when the feedback arrived, it came in the most polite dagger he'd ever received. "Great tech. Not quite aligned with the type of founder profile our partners prefer." Founder profile. He knew what that meant. It didn't say he was unqualified. It didn't say the product was weak. It just said, he didn't look like the people they normally bet on. That memory stuck with him. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. A calibration point. A signal that the game had rules, most of them unspoken, and nearly all of them rigged. And now, years later, sitting in seat 1A with a cold sandwich and a name left unspoken, Darius felt the same current running beneath the surface. A current of quiet exclusion, one that wrapped itself in manners, smiles, and airline uniforms. But he'd learned long ago, just because you're used to being overlooked doesn't mean you have to stay quiet. Sometimes silence is survival. Other times, it's a weapon. Darius didn't cause a scene. He never did. He didn't raise his voice, didn't press the call button again. He didn't ask for the manager, or demand a glass of wine to match the one his seatmate was swirling beside him. Instead, he moved with precision. His smartwatch vibrated once on his wrist. He tapped the screen, unlocking a secure interface connected directly to Wynn Cyber's executive command system, an app most people didn't even know existed. Built by his own engineers. Designed for moments exactly like this. He accessed the flight manifest first, using a tracking code embedded in his ticket metadata. It loaded within seconds, encrypted but not to him. He scanned down the crew list. Cabin lead, Chloe Branson, flight attendant, senior level, 6 years with Aurelia Sky. Her face appeared on his screen. Blonde. Mid-30s. Glossy resume. Trained in elite guest handling. Fluent in French. And yet, a troubling history beneath the surface. 2 complaints filed in the last 18 months, both labeled service disparity. Both dismissed due to lack of sufficient documentation. No disciplinary action. No follow-up notes. He opened the comment logs. Attentiveness to diverse passengers inconsistent. Uncomfortable tone when addressing certain guests. And the most recent entry referred to a diamond-tier passenger as Guy, while using titles for others. Darius exhaled, slow and steady. He tapped Log Interaction. Using the built-in audio buffer on his smartwatch, he replayed her voice from 10 minutes ago. "Hey buddy, we ran out of premium meals. This one should be fine." He didn't need dramatics. He needed data. He snapped a photo of the tray, time-stamped, geolocated, linked to the service log. Next, he silently activated discrete mode, which would begin recording tone, timing, and proximity data for the remainder of the flight. The AI would analyze each passenger interaction, map language choices, and flag inconsistencies based on behavioral bias indicators. This wasn't about revenge. This was about pattern recognition. And Chloe Branson had just become a case study. Darius closed the app, leaned back in his seat, and stared out the window into the dark sky. This wasn't war. Not yet. But it was reconnaissance. And for a man who spent his life building systems to detect silent threats, this was just the beginning of exposure. The signal went out at exactly 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time. From 35,000 feet in the air, a silent packet of encrypted data tunneled through a secured aviation satellite network. It didn't go to customer service. It didn't go to the airline's general inbox. It went straight to Zach Elmore, 26 years old, Haitian American, Wynn Cyber's lead data ops analyst and Darius' most trusted ally. Zach had a master's degree in behavioral data science from MIT and a reputation for breaking down systems faster than most people could spell algorithm. When the alert hit his phone in Manhattan, Zach was still at the office, wired on espresso and late-night hip-hop. He looked down at the screen. Subject, as 777, flag code, 1A, incident. Command, crosslink all cabin interactions, audit crew ID, CBX 601. His jaw tightened. This wasn't routine. He rolled his chair to the command station and pulled up the LiveLink dashboard. The system authenticated his credentials and decrypted the flight profile in seconds. He found Chloe Branson instantly. Her crew ID, history, passenger reviews, everything flooded in. Zach cross-checked it against Wynn Cyber's private bias detection archive, the system he'd helped build to expose patterns no corporate HR system could catch. It didn't just rely on complaints. It analyzed tone, eye contact captured in cabin security footage, micro-delays in service logs, and unspoken behavioral shifts over time. And what he saw? Patterns. Subtle, consistent, dangerous. 3 flagged instances in the last year. 2 involving black VIP passengers. 1 with an Indian executive who reported being ignored for 20 minutes while others were served wine. Zach's fingers danced across the keyboard. He opened a live trace on the flight's interaction logs, comparing timestamps, meal priority tags, and title usage across all passengers in first class. The data was irrefutable. Chloe had skipped Darius' title in every log entry. No, Mr. Wynn. No diamond tier override recognized. Service timestamp, 6 minutes after other guests. Meal status, manually marked unavailable, despite inventory confirmation logged 2 hours prior. Zach sat back in his chair. Gotcha, he muttered. He compressed the full report into a secure PDF, then uploaded it into the Executive Crisis Directory under Protocol Ember, a feature reserved for high-risk cultural incidents that could damage brand equity across global partnerships. He tagged the report, urgent. Then, he did what he always did when Darius sent a quiet signal. He went to war, quietly, surgically, and with proof no one could deny. Zach didn't stop at Chloe. Once the initial data pool confirmed the bias, he dug deeper, into the airline itself. Aurelia Sky was known for its luxury branding. Gold trim logos. Signature fragrances in every cabin. Video ads with models sipping champagne mid-flight, smiling at the camera with perfectly filtered grace. But behind the polished image, Zach knew something else lurked. Patterns always did. He launched an internal inquiry through Wynn Cyber's cross-partner ethics database, a repository that tracked high-profile complaints, legal settlements, and buried incidents most corporations preferred to forget. Within 30 seconds, the results lit up his screen. 4 private settlements in the last 5 years, all related to service inconsistency. 3 involved passengers of color. 2 involved first class. No headlines. No court appearances. Just closed cases, quietly paid and sealed behind NDAs. He opened one file. A black film director from Los Angeles. Denied boarding, despite having a valid first-class ticket. Alleged overbooking turned out to be a false flag. Her seat was later assigned to a white male customer who'd booked last minute. Aurelia's official response? Systemic oversight. Another case, an Indian entrepreneur on a flight to Dubai. Requested assistance 3 times mid-flight, only to be told, someone will be with you shortly. No one ever came. And then, one more. A retired Latina professor flying to London. Asked for sparkling water and was handed tap. When she questioned it, the attendant allegedly said, "You don't really need the extra bubbles, right?" Zach's chest tightened. This wasn't new. It was just hidden. Buried under layers of polished marketing and selective service. A culture that didn't scream discrimination, but whispered it. Through omissions, delays, shrugs. Zach knew what Darius was doing. He wasn't just gathering evidence for a complaint. He was unearthing a pattern the world needed to see. And the airline? They had no idea what storm was being mapped from inside their own cloud. Zach compiled everything: dates, settlements, victim profiles, and added it to the growing Ember dossier. The weight of the file now exceeded 100 megabytes. A soft chime echoed in the office. Upload complete. One more line added to the report. This isn't an isolated incident. It's an operational blind spot with a cultural cost. Zach leaned back, eyes on the screen. The system didn't just glitch. It evolved to favor the familiar. But tonight, that familiarity was on fire. Some people complain. Darius Wynn initiates protocol. As the cabin lights dimmed for mid-flight rest, he wasn't sleeping. He sat upright in seat 1A, his fingers gliding across the surface of his tablet with surgical calm. Zach's encrypted report had just come in, complete, annotated, time-stamped. Evidence backed by behavior analytics, language bias logs, and a 3-year record of Aurelia Sky's most protected secrets. Darius tapped once. A red circle appeared in the corner of his screen. Activate, Industry Watchdog Relay. This wasn't a corporate HR submission. This was a classified escalation system used by members of the Global Service Ethics Board, an international coalition of CEOs, cultural consultants, legal scholars, and consumer rights experts that Darius had helped found 2 years prior. Its purpose? To hold luxury industries accountable before public exposure ever hit the news cycle. The relay sent encrypted summaries to 3 independent auditors, 2 board members from the GSEB, and a legal liaison with the FAA's Department of Civil Aviation Rights. But Darius didn't stop there. He opened Aurelia Sky's customer transparency portal, a rarely used internal channel meant for preferred feedback from Diamond Tier members. It wasn't monitored in real time. Until now. He uploaded a brief statement. Discrepancies detected in guest treatment patterns aboard as 777, first class cabin. Cabin lead ID, CBX 601. Evidence logged. Interaction bias confirmed. Protocol audit requested. Then he attached one final file, a passenger survey. Crafted by his team, the form looked like a standard "How was your flight?" card. But built inside were micrometrics to detect unconscious bias. It measured language tone, wait times, perceived attentiveness, and more, all based on how passengers of different backgrounds felt during the same flight. He pushed it live. Within seconds, it landed in the inboxes of every first-class guest on flight as 777. They'd think it was just routine. They'd fill it out casually, unaware that their answers were feeding a machine designed to track truth where no one wanted to look. Darius didn't look for applause. He didn't want a confrontation in the aisle. He was building something bigger. A pattern. A ledger. A digital footprint of systemic behavior, woven together by people who never thought someone was watching. But Darius had always been watching. And tonight, the system had blinked. Which meant it could bleed. The wheels hit the runway at 5:04 a.m. local time. The touchdown was smooth, silent, even. But inside the system, alarms were already echoing. As flight has 777 rolled toward Gate 47 at Haneda Airport, Darius Wynn remained still in seat 1A. His tray was clear. His tablet was off. His suit was crisp, unwrinkled. And his eyes? Focused forward, not blinking. Protocol Zero Tolerance had been activated mid-flight. It was a contingency code developed within the Global Service Ethics Board, used only in situations where evidence of discriminatory behavior posed a high reputational threat to public-facing industries. It wasn't just a formality. It triggered a live response. In Tokyo, Aurelia Sky's regional compliance director received the alert at 4:41 a.m. A meeting was convened. The legal team was briefed. Internal Affairs issued an immediate flag on the flight's entire cabin crew. By the time the plane reached the jet bridge, the response team was already in position. At the end of the boarding tunnel stood 3 individuals in dark suits, 2 from compliance, 1 from legal. Behind them, a woman wearing a white blazer and a red lanyard, Director of Ethics Enforcement, Asia Pacific Division. As passengers gathered their bags and began filing out, polite smiles and sleepy murmurs filled the air. But Darius, he didn't move yet. He waited. Chloe Branson stood near the rear galley, unaware. She had reset her face to neutral, polite, pleasant, confident that the flight would close without incident, and she could return to her Tokyo hotel and write it off as just another high-maintenance passenger. But as the door opened, the red lanyard woman stepped in and calmly said, "Crew, please remain on board. This aircraft has been flagged for immediate post-service debrief." Chloe blinked. I don't understand. No one is being accused, the woman continued, but a Protocol Zero tolerance order requires immediate interviews and suspension from future flights until review is complete. Whispers moved down the cabin like turbulence. Darius rose quietly, adjusted his cuffs, and stepped into the aisle. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. As he exited the aircraft, the compliance director nodded at him. A silent acknowledgement. No fanfare. No exchange. But Darius understood. The system had been forced to open its eyes. And now, it had no choice but to answer for what it had pretended not to see. The headlines hit within hours. It started with a quiet tweet, just 9 words. Diamond Elite passenger denied meal. Hashtag seat 1A. No photos. No outrage. No names. But within 2 hours, it was retweeted over 12,000 times. By the time Darius Wynn arrived at his hotel in Shibuya, the story had already reached CNN, CNBC, and Tech Insider. Reporters didn't know the full story yet, but they knew enough to connect the dots. Aurelia Skye, a black tech CEO, first class, and a meal that was never served. Hashtag seat 1A began trending in 7 countries. People started sharing their own stories, quiet moments of being overlooked, talked over, or served last. Most weren't explosive, but they were consistent, chilling, in how ordinary they sounded. I was called sweetheart, while the man next to me was doctor. My husband got the wine list. I got tap water. My name was skipped. Again. Darius didn't post anything. He didn't have to. The system was already speaking for itself, through thousands of voices that had once been silent. Now, they had a language for what they experienced. It wasn't rage. It was recognition. Inside Aurelia Skye headquarters in New York, a red banner appeared across the internal server dashboard. Ethics violation alert. High priority. The board called an emergency meeting. PR scrambled to draft a response, but the legal team had already received notice from the FAA's Civil Rights Division. The Global Service Ethics Board confirmed receipt of the full report, complete with time-stamped logs, survey analytics, and video footage. By midday, Chloe Branson's employee status was changed to suspended pending investigation. The company issued its first official statement by 3:30 p.m. We deeply regret the experience of one of our most valued passengers. An internal investigation is underway. We are committed to full transparency and meaningful action. But the pressure didn't stop there. 3 major shareholders demanded a full audit of Aurelia's cultural training program. A national consumer watchdog group filed a request under the Airline Passenger Fairness Act. And Wynn Cyber? They said nothing. Because silence was no longer absence. It was strategy. It was structure. And now, the very culture that once whispered people out of power was being forced to speak. Clearly, publicly, and without room to hide. The Tokyo skyline glittered like a digital circuit, each building, each light, a signal blinking into the future. Darius Wynn stood alone on the balcony of his hotel suite. The city was quiet. But inside his mind, the noise had never been louder. He hadn't made a speech. He hadn't tweeted a thread. He hadn't raised his voice at 35,000 feet. And yet, the system had moved. Not because of noise, but because of truth. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove itself in the aisle of an airplane or beg for acknowledgement in a boardroom. It moves with precision, with data, with evidence too sharp to ignore and too heavy to bury. That was the lesson. Darius thought about a letter he'd received earlier that week, from a high school senior in Detroit. The kid wrote, "I want to build systems like you, but my counselor told me, that field isn't really built for people like us. What should I do?" Darius had read it 3 times before responding. And now, watching the planes take off in the distance, he whispered his answer out loud. Build anyway. Build even when you're told you don't belong. Build when they call you buddy instead of your name. Build when the meal they promised disappears the moment you sit down. Because one day, they won't just know your name. They'll know that you were the one who reprogrammed what they thought was untouchable. And maybe, just maybe, someone else will get to sit in seat 1A, not as a guest, but as a rightful passenger. And they won't have to fight for water, or wait for recognition, or wonder if they're being judged before they speak. They'll just sit and be seen. because someone before them decided enough was enough, and made the system remember.